welcome to the Art of Franchise Marketing. Each episode takes a deep dive into the franchise space and explores how the biggest and best brands handle national branding, franchise development, employee recruitment, and localized marketing on a daily basis. This podcast is brought to you by NetCertive, a localized digital marketing partner for franchise networks. NetCertive talks shop with franchise executives to discuss what's working, what's not, and answers the question, what else can you be doing to excel at the art of franchise marketing?
All right. Hello, and welcome to the Art of Franchise Marketing podcast. I'm your host, Erin Martin, and this episode is brought to you by NetCertive. Today, our guest is Doug Zarkin, the Chief Brand Officer of Modern Performance and Recovery Brands, former CMO of Pearl Vision, and author of Moving Your Brand Out of the Friend Zone, which I'm really excited to pick your brain on today. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And so I think just to kick it off, can you give our listeners some more background on you? You've had a long career with a ton of experience with franchise brands, and even before that, amazing brands under your belt. So Provide a little background on you.
So my career has really been a journey in understanding how to build businesses and build brands. And I got some great advice coming out of graduate school to get on the train at the very end and work my way to the front. And the reason why was because eventually when I ended up in the C-suite, I understood the roles and functions. I had done most of them, but most importantly, spoke the language of each of those roles and functions. So I was in a much better position to motivate those folks in those roles because it does take a team. And so my career began in the agency world in media, account management. I spent 7 years at Gray, where I started the youth entertainment and lifestyle division of Gray Advertising, which at the time was the largest private agency in the world. Some really fun projects. We worked on the launch of W Hotels, Reebok, but I think probably the coolest was we wrote the brand architecture for the Harry Potter franchise for Warner Brothers Consumer Products. And that was a chance to really affect culture in a big way. Went to the client side. You're talking to one of the few guys that can proudly say that he was an Avon lady. I spent a number of years at Avon helping them reinvent their model to go omni-channel, bring e-commerce, e-based learning in, and create their young women's business Mark. From there, went to Victoria's Secret to take a little business they had called Victoria's Secret Pink and really turn it into a cultural phenomenon, cross-category, shop and shop, e-com. But spent the bulk of my professional career, as you mentioned, at EssilorLuxottica as the CMO of Pearl Vision, where I had the chance to spend 11 years in really revitalizing an iconic brand. A brand that was part of a diverse portfolio of other brands in the category. It's one thing to know your competitors. It's another thing to know your competitors 2 offices down to the left. And so Pearl Vision was competing with the Sunglass Huts, the Lens Crafters, the Target Opticals, the Sears Opticals of the world, all of which EssilorLuxottica owned. And left the company to write my book, which, as you mentioned, is Labor of Love. I highly recommend it, but will never do it again. Because it is very vulnerable. And today I'm putting that into practice in my current role.
Love it. And before we jump into the book, I was curious, with all of your experience at those epic brands, which one stands out to you as something that you're most proud of or saw the biggest transformation in your time there? And you did mention the brand architecture for the Harry Potter promotions, but I don't know if it was that one or a different one that you're the most proud of.
It is honestly, it's Pearl Vision. And the reason is because as a CMO, you very rarely have the opportunity to put a 5-year plan into place. I had the opportunity to do that twice. The opportunity to put my fingerprints on that brand really through understanding the consumer, understanding the landscape, and working really collaboratively with our franchisees. I had a phenomenal group of very sophisticated franchisees. A market like New York had a dozen different franchise voices. And the challenge there is, how do you bring everybody together to create alignment? And it was made possible because we were all committed to the same thing, which was really restoring the power of the brand. The brand for 2 decades had really lived in the world of buy one, get one free. And that's not good from a retail math perspective. And so with that vision in mind, it was the opportunity to reinvent the iconography, the four-walled experience, redesign the store, redesign the website. It was a lot of transformation, but it was done at what I call the speed of smart. We were constantly testing and learning and innovating, but I had a great group to work with, both of franchisees, but importantly, put together the most powerful team I've ever worked with. of great leaders, each experts in their discipline, who all got on the boat and were rowing in the same direction. And that didn't start from day one, but over time we got in sync and were able to navigate through the pandemic and come out of the end as the number one quality of care brand, top 10% of brands on Entrepreneur's 500 list. And I think most importantly, 8 years of double-digit operating income growth.
Yeah, that's super impressive. And I think also highlights how much time it actually takes for transformation. Oftentimes you're like, you got a year vision, you have 2-year vision. It's like, it takes a while for true transformation, like getting the people on the right spots, all of that. Like it's a long road. So be able to have that play out for you is awesome.
You have to know that you have the cultural permission to innovate. The difference between fear and excitement is mindset. And if the mindset of your partners isn't locked into opportunity, but locked into concern about losing what they have, you're never going to evolve.
Yeah. And what did that process look like? Because I know even in the book, you talk about Pearl Vision specifically, and that you shifted that brand from what you were saying from discounts to trust and care.
Yeah.
So what did that entire process look like? Like when you first came in, where were you guys at? How did you come to that kind of vision and realization and then get that full plan executed?
So it was interesting that the decision to evolve the business was really driven by the economics of the business. The notion of having to give something away of value to sell something is not a great model. And eye care and eyewear is really deeply rooted in what we uncovered and learned to term small moments. Earning the trust of a patient begins before they even come into the eye care center. It begins with the way in which we're reaching out to them, the message that we're sending, understanding and respecting the commoditization of the category, in that cheaper isn't better, better is better. And so we wanted to elevate what we stood for because we were delivering amazing care and we weren't getting the credit for it because we were taking that message of care and slopping in a huge promotion on the back end. And incentivizing is okay. This isn't a purist perspective. Look, sales work, but they work when they're done smartly. They're worked when they're done strategically, not tactically. But you have to have equity along the way. You can use a incentive to help you close that choice, but that emotional decision to visit is just that. It's an emotional decision before the rational choice to actually buy.
So good. Yeah. And that was reminding me of something else later in your book that you said, where you talk about as marketers, we often get steered towards short-term gains. That is exactly it. Like you get a little addicted to we got to improve performance now. Everything has to happen now. And so you go for the shortcuts, which hurts the long-term plan.
Erin, it's a shame sometimes that you walk into a situation where your business is, and this is for anybody, this is generic. If your business is struggling, for example, and absolutely you need to have a trajectory change, but it's the equivalent of needing to lose weight or needing to get in shape. Working out once or twice isn't going to do it. Eating a salad once or twice a week isn't going to do it. You need to make a wholesale commitment to evolve. And in the case of Pearl, I do not want to stand on this podcast and tell you that it worked immediately. We took 2 steps back before we took 3 giant steps forward. We couldn't lose buy one, get one free until we did the hard work in driving up what I call in the book the brand value equation. The experience needed to be improved before we could elevate the price. The reason why we were buy one, get one free was that our experience was good, it wasn't great. And we certainly weren't communicating it in a way that was elevated enough to justify a $800, $1,100, $1,200 price point. So we needed to really work on the numerator, the experience, in order to elevate the denominator, which was the price, and still have an overwhelmingly strong brand value equation. And that took time. It took a commitment, it took a resiliency, not just for me, but from our franchisees, but it took a vision and a belief in the vision. And I can't tell you anything about our success without recognizing that our ability to deliver those results started with a mindset. And that mindset was really taken by every franchisee, every member of the corporate team, and honestly, our leadership in Milan, who believed in where we were going and were giving us the runway to do it.
Yeah. I equate that mindset change to like a lifestyle change related to the
Yeah.
getting healthier example. Like it is a full change. It is a full lifestyle change,
And
culture change, whatever you want to call it.
and look, we snuck a couple Oreo cookies and ice cream in there to keep the metaphor going, but we did it in a way that was systematic. We focused on looking inward. What were we good at? What weren't we good at? But what were we best at? Then we needed to look at how we were expressing our point of view, both in our physical four-walled experience, what it looked like, our iconography, which I had the opportunity to revisit, and then our messaging. And then really the magic happened in the four walls. Strategy without great execution is nothing more than words on paper. And so our owners, our franchisee owners, were committed to evolve the experience. It wasn't about us teaching them how to give an eye exam. It was about putting in guiding and consistent principles that we could count on at every eye care center that carried the name to stand for. When you don't have that degree of consistency, the consumer does not care who owns what location. They really don't when it comes to writing a review. If you get a bad review, that bad review is not Fred, owner of X. It's a bad review on the brand. And franchise brands are as strong as their worst location. And so we needed to really have the franchisee leadership agree that we needed to make some systematic changes. We needed their input, we needed their guidance, but there was a real belief that, hey, look, the franchisor, Luxottica, Pearl Vision, really wanted to evolve the brand, and we were committed to go the journey with them. So as long as we did it in an inclusive way, and so long as we were transparent. And I think during my 11 years, we were pretty darn good at being transparent and consistent, most importantly.
Yeah. And at the front end of the experience, I'm curious, how did you guys dig into and surface what you were really good at and what your differentiator was that you needed to lean into? We've talking to a lot of marketers about data, how you gather, create it to help inform what you're doing. Where did you guys start?
Data doesn't make decisions for us. We make decisions using data. And the reason is because, as I like to say, data is only as good as the questions that you ask. And so we did a lot of quant and qual research. We talked, one of the things that I had the privilege of doing was I worked in our eye care centers, but most importantly, I interviewed the exes. If you ever want to know what you are on your best and worst day, talk to somebody who broke up with you. If thank goodness my wife didn't interview my exes before we got married. But that's really what we did is we talked to franchisees that had terminated with us, consumers that had fired us. We learned what we weren't delivering. And then we talked to our fiercest advocates, those that had been with us for 5 or 10 years, franchisees that were hired by Dr. Stanley Pearl and wanted to understand what they believed in. And what was interesting is when you laid that out into a very simple Venn diagram, the brand positioning was born. Hardest sentence I've ever written is a brand, as I ever write, is a brand's position. Took me about 6 months to really crystallize Pearl Vision's brand's position. And once we did, that became the North Star for everything that we did.
And what was that brand position?
You're testing me, but I'll never forget it. Genuine eye care from your neighborhood doctor. Couple important things in that. Number one, you hear nothing about eyewear. Eyewear is the result of an amazing eye care experience. Eyewear is a commodity. 2 for $89, free this, free that. It was the commitment to care and the way in which, the how, not just the what, that separated us. Now, don't get me wrong. We had an amazing assortment, and I had the privilege of working to evolve that into reflecting the best brands that money could buy, both on the frame and the lens side. But it started with really focusing on the how we treated somebody. That notion, and I call it thinking human, which is every person that walked into our eye care center, we treated as if they were the only person that walked into our eye care center. So it wasn't a prefabbed solution for them. It was understanding their lifestyle needs. If they were wearing their glasses 24 hours a day, you would recommend a frame that was a little bit lighter on their face, lenses that would go from clear to sun, those kind of things. That is how we were able to win, by really getting into understanding what we stood for, why we stood for it, and did we have the right to win in that area. And being founded by a doctor with franchisees, many of them, almost the majority that were doctors, we had the permission as a brand to live this positioning. And it was just a matter of bringing it to life.
That's awesome. And one thing, oh man, that hit home is the brand positioning statements. Just positioning in general, when the competition and market dynamics are changing so much,
Yep.
it's just this, it can feel like a mountain to get right. So I love that you faced the hard truths and had the courage to look at your X's. That is a wealth of gold, but it takes courage to look at some of those hard truths in the face. That is some rough information that you're going to be hearing.
And I would say to you, any leader that goes into a brand, you have to recognize if you have the cultural permission to do that kind of excavation. If you don't, it's a watch out. But if there isn't that intellectual honesty about what you're not doing well, it's impossible to move forward. I was given the cultural permission. It was a directive from Milan, but also franchisee leadership wanted an evolution, wanted to move forward, wanted to understand how they could get rid of buy one, get one free. So you had the will, they just needed the skill. They needed the talent to help them get there. And again, that's where I was very fortunate to put together the highest performing team I've ever worked with in achieving that goal, both internal and external partners.
And what's your take, or how did you approach revisiting that brand positioning or defending it, or just having it either evolve or not over time? What's your take on that? Because that's the piece where I struggle a ton. I just mentioned when there's new competition, there's new things coming up every day, and you might need to alter your positioning a little bit. Or what's your take on that piece when you have such a dynamic market at play at all times?
It is not a good idea to play with your brand's position. Your positioning is your North Star. Your positioning needs to reflect the art of sacrifice. Every word in your brand position stands for something. How that positioning comes to life will always evolve. A brand that has that notion of personalization, even just the term personalization, it means something different today than it meant a year ago. So the execution of how that positioning comes to life certainly evolves. The positioning itself shouldn't, unless you have a real serious business issue where you're marketing something or you're standing for something that just is outdated or are not needed.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got to solidify your North Star, educate, which can't be moving all over the board.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for internal and external customers. All right, jumping more into your book too, if you had to give like a quick recap and one of the biggest takeaways from the book, what would that be for our listeners?
The whole notion of the friend zone it comes out of personal relationships. A land before time, before we met that special someone, we would date, we would meet people. And on occasion, you would have feelings for somebody that perhaps weren't the same intensity of the feelings they had for you. And the only way you'd find that out is you'd make your move. And they would put you in the friend zone. And that's the old adage of, listen, I don't feel the same way about you, let's just be friends. And that relationship dynamic exists in marketing significantly, but it's very hard to know if you are in the friend zone until it's almost too late. The book is really predicated on trying to identify where your brand falls in the different relationship zones. Are you in a state of brand hate, which is a brand that honestly doesn't really care about its customers, at least on the surface, but is making a ton of money? And there are plenty of brands that live in the world of brand hate that you would know it. I'm not going to tell you them online here, but I think we all know brands that we have to work with, or businesses that we have to work with for whatever reason, that just don't care about us, that we don't necessarily trust, but we have to use. There are brands that we're friendly with, which is when, look, they're fine. As my wife would call it, you're fine. It's fine. Where your level of passion and trust is in the middle. That doesn't mean that if a bigger and better deal comes around, you're not going to leave. And then there's the relationship, what I call the brand fling. And that's when something goes viral. We all talk about, I want this to go viral. You don't. The reason is because it's like a band that has a one-hit wonder. You know, it's great that they had the number 5 song, but trying to replicate it, or when the rest of the album is trash and they try to replicate it with their next album and they can't get there, that's not sustained success. Brand flings are not sustained success.
Burns hot and fizzles out.
Absolutely. Brand love is sustained success. And brand love is when you have a high degree of passion, high degree of trust. It is very hard to get there. And it's actually when you're there, that's when the work really begins in terms of staying there. And that's when your customer lifetime value increases. That's when your existing customer base is growing. That's when your retention in terms of time between purchases is shrinking. That's when you're hitting it on all cylinders. And it's a very special place to be. but it's also a terrifyingly exciting place to be because as quickly as you got there, that's as quickly as you can get out of there.
Yeah. And so you've worked on a ton of different brands. And what's the key pillars for you that are needed to get to that brand love quadrant?
So I think, again, it goes to the brand value equation. Brand value equation fuels the dynamic of passion and trust, which fuels the different relationship zones. A brand that is focused on an amazing experience, first and foremost. And there are incredible examples across different categories. In the hospitality category, the one that comes to mind most often is the Ritz-Carlton. You're not thinking about the $490 price tag you're paying for the room when you walk in and they address you by name and your room is ready and you get to your room and there's a welcome bottle of water and a little bit of fruit, and then they call you 20 minutes after you checked in just to make sure you don't need anything. And the turn down service is there. When you go to the pool, there's chairs ready and somebody brings you a towel. All of the ways in which they treat you as if you are the only visitor of their resort. You don't think about the fact that it's $500 a night. You go to a business hotel and your room isn't ready and the Wi-Fi isn't good and the hairdryer is broken and the towels are not soft. Even though it's $99 or $199, you are not happy. And it's a long way of saying that the way to really know if you are or to get into the world of brand love is to double down on the experience, and then price not falls away but becomes less of an issue because your numerator is so strong.
Yeah, adding value everywhere you can.
Adding value not just in what you do but how you do it.
Yeah. And so break down the brand value equation for us then. What does that equation mean?
So brand value equals experience as your numerator divided by price as your denominator.
Okay, gotcha.
The delta between your numerator and your denominator gives you an indication of how strong your brand value is. And the greater that relationship, north of 4 to 5 to 1, is when you will fall into brand love. High-end automobile companies, high-end travel, dare I say, the restaurant that you go to in your neighborhood where the waiter knows your name and you have a great experience. And I talk about my favorite diner out here in Long Island in the book. The way that they deliver an amazing experience to me isn't because the food is off the charts, isn't because the ambiance is off the charts. It started when we started going when the kids were young and we had stuff. Erin, they don't tell us as parents that kids come with stuff. And when you had 2 kids under 8, you've got a lot of stuff. And I'll never forget, they would always seat us at a table for 6, even though we were 4. I always wondered, why did they do that? Table of 4 is right over there. Why are they putting us at 6? And so one day I asked the waiter, I said, why are you putting us at this big table? He's like, because you just need the space. He's like, just give you some more space so you can enjoy it. That was just a small moment of care and connection. When they bring out the crayons for the kids. Again, that doesn't really cost them anything. It's just a moment. And yes, the free chocolate chip cookie at the end of the day doesn't stink either. But it is not because the dining experience in terms of this isn't a high-end steakhouse or Michelin star restaurant. It's just easy and I feel comfortable and I feel taken care of. And that goes a long way in strengthening the value equation. And every business can do that. Every franchise business in particular can do that because franchise businesses are run by the most important people in a franchise business, which is the franchisee. And they're living in that community and they're bringing that brand to life every day. So if there is that focus on, let me treat every customer as if they're the only customer, you're not going to lose.
Yeah. And knowing that customer so well, like in that restaurant example, it's, oh man, they know the family and how they sprawl the kids.
They know the family. They knew the drink order, and it wasn't because we were any different than anybody else, but they treated us as if we were different than everybody else. And I've watched them do that with the next generation. Now that my kids are teenagers, it's different, but I watch them do that same thing. You go to the diner on a Saturday to grab a late lunch, and you see the same people and you see the same methodology. And the owners of this diner have it nailed. They can raise their price on an omelet, nobody cares.
Yeah, so good. And so I'm curious to just live in the world and see the other brands out there. Like, who in your mind is also crushing it with these type of customer experience and small moments, whether it's franchise brand or other? Who else do you think are top leaders right now and why?
I'm going to give you an answer that you're probably going to laugh at and say, really? I'm going to tell you Delta, and here's why.
I could see.
It's not because of the thank you note that they give me when I walk on the airplane. That's wonderful. But I'll give you a real life example. So unfortunately, my son, like every teenage boy or most teenage boys, plays sports. And unfortunately, he had an injury that is preventing him from coming on our family vacation. And so he's going to stay home with the in-laws while we take my daughter and her friends on spring break. And I called Delta and I said, listen, I need to cancel this one ticket. And the first person that I got on the phone said, it's past the expiration date. We can give you an e-credit, but we can't refund. And I said, listen, I know that's page 7 of the customer service script, but can I talk to supervisor? Because honestly, it's an enormous amount of money to have as an e-credit. And it would just be a bigger help for me in my situation if I could get a refund. And she was like, sure. And she put me in touch with a supervisor. And I said, before you tell me what the ticket says, I want to just tell you what's going on. And I walked her through it. And she goes, do you have your doctor's name? And I gave him the doctor's name. She's like, do you have the date of the surgery? Yep. She goes, if we needed a letter, would you provide it? And I said, yeah, if you really felt you needed one, I'd give you a letter. I'll even send you pictures of him and his cast. And she's like, no. She's like, I just needed to know that you have these things. She's like, we're going to do it. She's like, I'm a mom. And if it was me, I understand that you're having to make a hard decision because you don't want to ruin your vacation for your older daughter because of your younger son. So I imagine you deal with a lot of stress. She goes, I'll just override it. You're good to go. And that's not going to stop me. I'm likely going to reinvest that money anyway in another trip. But it just was an easy thing for them to do when they treated me as a human being. And that wasn't about breaking the rules. It was about looking at me as a person. I think they do a great job. I think they consistently do a great job. They have such a volume of business that, of course, you hear the horror stories.
Yeah.
But overwhelmingly, when I've had issues with the airline, they've always stepped up and treated me as a person. And those kind of things on big brands are hard. Small brands is easy. Neighborhood brands, the tailor that I go to has probably revisited tailoring a piece of clothing for my son as he's growing 2 or 3 times. And he charges me like $5 every time I bring it in. He's like, you've already did the big tailoring. Let me let down the pants for you really quick. And it's those small things. It's not being penny wise and pound foolish. It's realizing that I'm creating a customer for life. Every business has the power to create a customer for life if you choose. You just have to make that conscious decision.
Yeah, that's a great example. The airline industry in general is just a great case study of good, of bad, of everything under the sun. Even that brings to mind for me Southwest. I fly Southwest a ton. And I've even gotten just love vouchers for a delay that happened. Every one of our tickets, an automatic love voucher as sorry for the huge delay. We want to make it right. And there was no human interaction. So it was like, there's things that you can do to add to that value, even without that personal connection too. You have to go,
I bought a food item online and I got a thank you note from the owner. And it was an email. It was probably a prefabbed email, but it was very heartfelt. I've started this business a year ago out of my kitchen and I'm scaling it. And I appreciate that you ordered X. And if you have any issues, please let me know. Here's my personal email address. I think the sincerity of the how overshadows even the what. Like the last thing we all need is another email. But if the email is written in a certain way and takes a certain approach, it becomes a valuable tool.
Yeah. One more brand that I have to share that I just absolutely love because it's in the franchise space is the UPS store. I know I've shared this before, but oh my goodness, it's like what is happening over there with their operations to be so on point. And then knowing your customer, like I am such a busy mom, and when I go in, you would never know it unless you're looking for it, but there's a tiny little section of toys because mom or dad has kids in tow. And my son will come with me to the UPS store anytime now because he knows that he's going to drop the fake letters in a play mailbox while I'm doing my thing real quick. Everything with them is just so awesome. You're in and out. It's crazy.
I think they have done an amazing job as a brand. To me, the way in which they welcome you, the way in which they speak to you, the attitude, they print out the receipt and they put it on a piece of paper, cardstock, and they hand it to you. If you flip it over, there's obviously a bounce back coupon. But I think they're a great example of where they've taken a transaction and they've created engagement. And I think they're doing a wonderful job in making that brand sticky. And again, that's a commodity. Shipping is a commodity. DHL, FedEx, UPS, it's all the same thing, except that it isn't. And I think the UPS store is a really good example. I'm glad you called that out. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and just the extra services they have that they don't, it's interesting. They don't promote it a ton, so you don't get too much dilution, but then you realize, oh, I could drop my USPS packages here. That's wildly convenient as well, because I'm an online shopper. I'm returning multiple pieces of clothing that didn't fit. Yep. And this one has to go to, UPS. This one has to go via USPS, but I can all go to one place for it. So
I love the whole Amazon drop-off return thing there, as I think a stroke of genius. It's created them as a valid part of my ecosystem, not just a place I go to when I absolutely need something. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Yes. I know we're coming up on time here, but I did just want to ask one final question. If there's anything I didn't ask that you wished we could have touched on or shared before we close out.
I think we have to touch on it because I think we would be remiss if we didn't, which is AI.
Oh, yes.
I think you got to touch on it. Here's my 5 seconds on it, or maybe 30 seconds, depending on how long my answer is. AI is innovation. Innovation, and I talk about this in the book, the first two letters stand for insight. The approach to AI, in my opinion, again, it's just my opinion, needs to start with what are you trying to solve for? Is it a segmentation issue? Is it creative volume? Is it personalization? When you understand what you're solving for, there are hundreds of AI apps out there. And I think the risk that marketers have right now is it's all about FOMO. And that is not a marketing strategy. Fear of missing out is not a marketing strategy. Fear of missing out is not a strategy with AI. I wouldn't recommend a single piece of AI unless you first started out with what are you trying to solve for?
Yeah.
If you are trying to build an information hub inside your business, there's AI for that. If you're looking to build creative pipeline into social, there's AI for that, and so on. Finding the right AI partner has to start with figuring out what AI is trying to solve for you.
Yes. Yes, I love that you brought that up and have that viewpoint, because one thing that I'm talking to a lot of marketers of is the systematic application of AI and how it needs to be just like innovation. It has to be a part of your fiber, your operating procedure, everything, which has to start with what are you solving for?
And goes back to what is your brand's position. If you stand for something, every tool in your toolbox should help you bring that position to life. And if it does, it's valuable. If it doesn't, that doesn't mean that you don't do it. It means that it's a want to do, not a must do. And how much time, how much energy are you spending on it?
Yes. Yeah, and that's where I love the data analysis side of a lot of the AI tools too, because you can easily start with what are you trying to solve? And then if you don't have first party data that can help you inform that solution, you can go out and use agents or different various tools to scrape things, analyze data, and bring data to the party to then use decision making on your own. Like we were talking about earlier, human decisions, not just the data making decisions. And then you've got a path forward and then a million AI tools under the sun for execution and creative purposes from there.
Look, with any tool, at the end of the day, especially in a franchise business, you have to want to be able to execute. The passion has to be there. All of the great work that you do behind the scenes, all of the great work you do in driving traffic, if the passion and the four-walled level is not there in a business that's a four-walled business, it's not going to deliver the kind of results that it should. And so that's the importance of the belief system. That's the importance of ensuring that you have the cultural permission to innovate and being aware of when you don't.
So good. Doug, thank you so much for coming on. Before we do our outro, where can we find your book? Where can we learn more?
Shameless plug for the book. It's available at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle. And if you want to find out more information about me, you can visit my website, dougzarkin.com.
Sounds good. So yes, everyone check out Moving Your Brand Out of the Friend Zone. We can put a link in the comments too when we post this. And thank you so much, Doug, for coming on. I know you've been on before when you were at Pearl Vision, so it's so fun to have you back and talk more marketing.
Thanks, my friend. I appreciate it.
All right, and thanks for everyone who listened in on this episode. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Art of Franchise Marketing. This show is brought to you by Netsertive. We help franchise brands and multi-location businesses run localized digital marketing at scale. To learn more, visit netsertive.com.